Hello everyone, and welcome to today's free online event, Painting Beautiful Watercolor Landscapes with Joyce Hicks. My name is Sarah Alspaugh, and I'm the Online Education Manager here in the Fine Art Department at F&W Media. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I'm going to go over a few things before we get started here. Everyone today is joining us in listen-only mode, and that means that you are muted so we don't pick up noise from your end. However, you should be able to hear and see everything that we're doing. We have a PowerPoint presentation for you, and you should see the first slide, Transforming the Landscape. Also, we are recording today's webinar, and we will be posting that on Artist Network's YouTube account, as well as sending you an email on Thursday with a link to watch the recording and a special discount. The discount will be on Joyce's book, Painting Beautiful Watercolor Landscapes, at northlightshop.com. So keep an eye on your inbox on Thursday for that follow-up email with this information. And if you have to leave early or you know someone who wasn't able to join us today, they will have access to that recording, and feel free to share that recording with your friends as well. If you have a question, whether it's a question for Joyce or just a technical question, please type it into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel. And I will be asking Joyce questions throughout her presentation today, as well as we should have some time for questions at the end. So please type your questions for Joyce into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel. Okay, so today Joyce will be sharing some photo references of her work, and she'll tell you how she paints beautiful watercolor landscapes. Joyce Hicks resides in Lantana, Texas, where she shares a light-filled home with her husband Larry and a little dog, Sassy. She keeps a busy calendar, traveling, writing, jurying exhibitions, and conducting watercolor workshops throughout the United States and internationally. She's a self-taught, award-winning signature member of the prestigious American Watercolor Society. Her paintings are widely published and appear in Art Journey America Landscapes, Splash 12, Splash 13, and Splash 15, all published by Northlight Books, and Watercolor Painting by Tom Hoffman. Out Santa Rosa Creek appeared on the cover of Watercolor Artist magazine, which also has included a full-length story of her work and travel. Her stunning landscapes are easily recognizable and reflect her unique perception of the world. Welcome, Joyce. We're happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, let's get started with talking about, let me get to the first slide for you here. All right, here you go, the first photo reference. You can take it away.
All right, thanks. Well, I wanted to, it seems like the thing people have been most interested in regarding my art has been about how I go about taking an ordinary scene and transforming it into a work of art. And one thing I think it's important to do is when you go out into the landscape, you need to be sure and start recording all that inspires you and take pictures and make notes. And very importantly, you need to describe your feelings for the place. And you need to understand what is the one most important thing that made you want to stop before a scene in the first place. And I do talk about this more in my book in Chapter 1. This book was a real labor of love because it gave me a chance to be able to share all of the things that were most important to me and that I felt most accelerated my growth as an artist. It's not a book about how to paint from photographs. I don't recommend or advise doing that at all. But it's more a book about how to transform ordinary scenes into beautiful ones. And so some of the, most of these slides, well, in fact, all of these slides on this PowerPoint presentation are just photos that I took from our car window, either through the front window or out the side on my passenger side as we traveled around the United States. And so this was a scene that I came upon, and we were on that road, and I had my husband park the car, and I immediately was drawn to this little scene. So I had to figure out what it was that compelled me to want to stop long enough to make notes and take a photo. And for me, it was the very interesting geometry of the buildings that you see there and the depth of the landscape that they're sitting before. Remember, as an artist, you can paint it how you want it to be and not how it actually is. And in Chapter 2, I outline 4 ways that you can transform a scene. Sarah, if you'll move that on to the painting. So in this scene, I kept just about all of the shapes that you saw previously. I kept the barn, I kept the shape that was before it, and I wanted to keep that road because it led you right into the scene. So there wasn't much that I took away from this scene. But you notice how I did change the color. I left that front building white. It gave it a little more drama, and by layering the organic shapes before that, I was able to create some depth. And then you can see the distance that I saved in the landscape as well. So next slide. This is one of my favorite scenes, and I really love this. I called my painting that resulted from this scene a farmhouse I saw in Virginia. It won awards, and it was so simple the way the scene was laid out. Of course, it was this blue farmhouse that caught my eye first. And you can see that the dark window in the upper story really was in a perfect place to begin the viewer's journey around it. That would have become my focal point, and that would be a place that the viewer could start to journey around the painting. And I liked the way that there were remnants of the life that was lived out there with the children's toy and the wading pool. So it had a real strong element of family life and hominess. And look at the rows of the garden, how they take the eye right back into the painting. So these are the things that I would keep and that I would capitalize on and exaggerate in my painting, because this is what I wanted to say. So next. So here it is. You can see I kept those main elements, but I subtracted some of the information like the children's toys and all of that. I took that away, and I wanted to give the feeling of sunshine on that blue house, and so you can see how I've added that warmth to the very front of that, and I have kept that main window just as I had planned originally to be very dark with a lot of contrast, so the eye starts there. And the rows, I changed those around so that they would be more interesting. They were a little scraggly in the photo. So that's your job as an artist, is to rearrange the elements that you find and make an interesting design, because that's what your painting is going to be built upon, is strong design. I love this. This is in Westport, California, and some little cottages, very, very plain. And this was more about, you'll either have a very strong connection one way or the other. It will be a strong visual response, or it'll be a very strong emotional response that you have to a particular scene. And you can see there's nothing special about these little cottages, but there was a lot of great repetition going on in the windows, and you can't really see it very well here, but you can see this sea that lies far beyond. So there was a very strong emotional response to that, and I then had to decide, what do I want to keep in that scene and what do I want to leave out in order to exaggerate the feelings about the place. And then I would use my imagination then to exaggerate these things. So you can see in this is a small 9x12 study that I did in preparation for possibly doing this in a larger format. And you can see that I opened up that sea because that was important. And even though it didn't show in the photo, I knew it was there, and I knew it would lend to the overall feel of the hominess of these little coastal cottages. This is a little scene that I just luckily caught as we were going over this bridge. So see, your photos don't have to be great photography. The only reason I think it's important to capture these images is so that you have something that will jog your memory and take you back to that particular place. It's never going to be something that you paint from, but just it will ignite that memory so that you can paint those feelings of it back into your piece of art. So this little depot, I barely got it, and it was pretty ordinary when you look at it the first time. But if you take a second look at this scene, you'll see that the scene uses, excuse me, the scene uses the element of repetition. It really uses it in a great way, and you can see all of the repeating shapes of the architecture. You can see the repeating shapes of the telephone poles and the chimneys. All of the chimneys are repeating shapes, and then you have the repeating shapes of the rectangular windows. So it was a great opportunity then to take advantage of using that element of repetition to move the viewer's eye around the scene. And it leads it into a scene of a bygone era, which was very appealing to me. And you'll find more discussion on this where I talk about the elements of design in Chapter 5 of my book. So let's see the painting. So I took advantage of all that was in that landscape. You can see that the organic shapes, I did change those so that I could get a little more interest, and I added some shapes that might appear to be some type of a pine tree shape. It's not important that you accurately describe those because you're designing, and so I thought the triangular shapes of these pine trees would be a good contrast for the softer organic shapes that are scattered throughout the painting. So that was the only reason for me to change that. And then I used color to lead the eye around the painting and back into the painting, particularly with this gold that you can see. And the little depot all by itself kind of stands out. It has its own unique color. Of course, the American flag was great in it, and I did not want to leave that out. The railroad, I wanted to leave that in because it was a way to take the eye back into the painting as well. And then you can see the distance was very far back, so it needed very little detail to get the eye back. But the telephones they do a good job of getting you back. You want your viewer to be able to move around your painting and see all of the parts of it. This is one of my very favorite scenes. This was somewhere, I think, in Virginia, caught from the car window as well. And I did do a larger painting of this, and I called it Hanging Out to Dry. And what drew me to this scene? Well, when I saw that red piece of laundry hanging on the clothesline, that caught my eye, and I thought, how perfect is that? Because we know that red is the complement of green, and so I could use that spot of color to become my focal point and a place for the viewer to start his journey around the painting. And I discussed this about, I discussed the importance of the focal point. You know, if you don't have a focal point, it would be kind of like a book without a first chapter to pull you into the story. So the focal point is very important, and I do discuss this in Chapter 4 of my book. So the first questions you've got to ask yourself is, what do I need to contribute to what I want to say? So what I want to add, what do I want to leave out, what do I want to move or change about this scene in order to arrive at a more creative composition. So in the next scene, you'll see how I rearrange this little scene. This is also just a small 9 by 12 study, And it was about that red piece of laundry. So you can see that bright color immediately attracts the eye. And anytime I think you have laundry drying in the sunshine, it does lend a feeling of hominess to the scene. So I'm attracted to that, and I know a lot of us are. It didn't have a road, if you noticed. There was no road, but you want to have a way to lead the viewer into the scene, and a road or a path or even brush strokes are a great way to be able to lead the viewer back to what it is that your main theme of your painting is. So I did add that and took advantage. I've used lots of interesting texture, which is a repetition and a repeating pattern. I put this texture in with a palette knife, which I discussed in my book. The palette knife is a little unordinary tool to use in watercolor paintings. I use it to scrape paint away, and all of the branches that you see in these tree forms have been made with the palette knife, as well as the telephone pole on the left side there in the foliage. That was scraped in with the palette knife, and so it's a very handy instrument, and I think it lends to the look of the look that my paintings have.
Hey, Joyce. It sounds like you may have stepped away from the phone a little bit. It got a little quieter while you were talking on that last slide, so I just wanted to interrupt real quick and ask if you could step closer to your phone.
All right, I've done that. Is that better, Sarah?
Yeah, that sounds a lot better.
Okay.
I have a few questions here, if now's a good time to interrupt and ask you a few of those.
Sure.
Okay. Luann, I was reading two names at once. She wants to know what colors you use. Do you want to talk about the actual colors you use here? The names of them, I guess, is what she's looking for.
Yes, and also I do address that in my book. I do name the colors on my palette. I have a very limited palette, not really unusual colors. They're all named in the book. I think I have 15 in all. I never use all of those colors in any one painting, and sometimes never more than maybe 4 or 5. I think it's easier to obtain color harmony when you don't bring in strange colors, but you keep with just a very limited. And I have found over time that I can mix just about any color combination that I want with these few paints. When I first began, I was like everyone. I had no idea of what to use. So I picked, I think it's a good idea to pick a mentor, someone that you admire, whose work you admire, and you can start by emulating their palette of colors. And that will be a good learning experience for you, because as you experiment with mixing colors that you find in their work, then you will learn a lot on the way while you're doing that. But as I became more accomplished, I began to have a better understanding of what I wanted in order to have the paintings look the way I wanted them to look, that fit my personality and could describe my vision. And so I went back and I discarded. I probably had a palette that had 32 wells, and I started discarding colors. And I decided to create a palette of all transparent and semi-transparent color, and making sure that I had a warm and cool version of my blues, my yellows, and my reds. And you'll learn that as you study color. And so now it's a limited palette. I hope that helps answer that question.
Okay, thank you. One other question here is, how did the landscape become your chosen genre?
Well, that is a great question, because I call myself an accidental artist. I in no way ever set out to become a landscape artist, a painter, or an artist of any kind. but I think that there was an element of that, like there is in all of us from our influences from when we're growing up. And I think that landscape chose me and actually began in childhood with strong influences from my father and my grandfather. I spent wonderful days with my father, who was an avid outdoorsman, trekking over open fields and along riverbanks and dry creek beds. And it was during those happy expeditions that I believe my love of the landscape took root. My summer months were always spent with my grandparents, who also played a major role in shaping my life. They lived in Texas, where my grandfather lived the rugged lifestyle of a Gulf Coast shrimper, and I spent many unforgettable hours in his company. He would take me along with him each morning before the sun came up to board his rickety old boat that was literally held together with baling wire. And we would head out to sea together just in time to see the most glorious sunrises. I will never forget those precious days, the smell of the ocean, the salty smell of the ocean, or the creaking sound of his old boat as it chugged toward the horizon under an umbrella of squawking seagulls. Those were wonderful days, and I think it was with those two figures in my childhood where I really fell in love with the landscape. But like all of us, life gets in the way. We have other things to accomplish before we are at a point where we can finally reflect and try to figure out why we choose certain things. And I think this is why I have chosen landscapes.
Oh, thank you. What a great story. I feel like I can picture it. I feel like I'm there, you know, tasting the air and seeing the rickety boat.
Oh, it was rickety, I tell you, and no one ever thought to say to us, put on a life jacket, don't crawl up on the top of that boat, you're too close to the edge. He always brought a bag of moon pies and a stalk of bananas. No one cared if we ate healthy or not. You know, it was just a wonderful, wonderful time, and so I think it was important for me.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That sounds really like a great impression that was made on you. Okay, let's go to the next one here. I'll kind of let you get back to these, but we've got a lot of great questions coming in, so I just want to remind everyone to type their questions into the question section, and we'll take a break and again in a little bit here and get to more of those, and then, like I said, we'll have some time at the end to get hopefully to as many of them as possible.
Yes,
all right.
Feel free, Sarah, to interrupt me on any of these slides, and we can always get back to these. This slide is, we were in Walport, Oregon, and my husband is so dear. He has helped me and never put obstacles in my way, and so when I wanted to start photographing scenes, I would always have an expedition for us to go on every day. And this was a road that, as I had finally said, I think I'm through, and he was a sigh of relief. I saw one more road that looked as if it led off to possibly the ocean, and so I said, oh, stop, there's one more, and I promised him it would be the last one. But you can see the back of our car parked there, and I got out on that road, and I began walking the length of that road, and when I got to the end of the road, there was the ocean. And so I named this painting that resulted from this scene, I found it in Walport. And people say, well, what did you find in Walport? Well, I found paradise, and I found it at the end of that road where I found the sea. As I stood there, I could feel the soft breezes that carried in the smell of the ocean, and it was brilliant in sunlight. And so I wanted to, for others to be able to stand at the end of that road with me and feel what I felt that day. So as well as taking the photographs, I made lots of notes, not just about, what was there, but about how that day made me feel. And I made sketches of that scene, and that was the beginning of the development of this painting. So I knew when I began it, I just pulled out the photos, and I pulled out my sketches, and I pulled out my notes, and I was transported back to that time when I stood there at the end of that road. And that stayed with me while I began to complete this painting. And so you must identify what it is about a scene that attracts you or moves you in order to be able to paint it. And that's what you want your painting to be about, how you felt about that day and about that place and about that scene. This is a very ordinary little photo. In fact, you can see the reflection of the car window. That's why I say don't worry about finding that perfect, great, fantastic scene. Those don't come along very often. But if you retrain your eye, and this is what I wanted my book to be about, is how can we begin seeing the landscape and what's there with new eyes. Instead of seeing things, you begin to train your eye to see the beauty in shapes. And those shapes then can be arranged to create a compelling composition. And then you use the elements of design to add the feeling that you want to feel. So this little ordinary scene, what first caught my eye as we were on that old road was I loved the striped awnings and the old farmhouse. So I decided I would name this painting I Love Green Stripes. And that would be sort of what the theme of my painting would be. But there were some, it didn't have a way to lead the eye in very well. There was nothing as far as the lead in. You can see the road is off to the left. And if you look at the repetition of the telephone poles, they're taking the eye away from where I want it to go. So I have to use my knowledge about composition and using the elements of design in order to get you to this little farmhouse with the green striped awnings. So as we look at the painting, you'll see it's also was a small study. And there is a speed video of this on YouTube. You can just Google my name. And I did this painting in one sitting, and then I condensed it. Probably took me an hour, and I condensed it down to about a 7-minute video. So you can see how I begin to paint and how I move across the whole painting. But by the time I pick up that brush, I have done a lot of preparatory work, and I stress this over and over again, is that if you don't understand how to paint something, if you've never painted a rooftop or you've never painted an awning or a clothesline, you need to practice painting those symbols so that when you get ready to paint, once you pick up the brush, you can be confident about what you're getting ready to do. But you can see I wanted the house to have that homey feel. Well, here I go back to the clothesline. That always says hominess to me because it was part of my growing up years. And so I added the little clothesline there for that feel of hominess. But I didn't want it to be too prominent. It's not about the clothesline. It just was an element that would add to the feeling of the place. And so the front of that little house with the striped awnings became the most dominant area of that painting. And then I moved that road. I used the road. I used that element, but I used my knowledge about composition and what I wanted to do in the painting. And so I used the road to take the eye back to what my painting was going to be about.
Okay. How about a few more questions, because we're getting some good ones.
All right.
Linda is asking if you will talk about your white spaces. Do you use Frisket or recommend anything special?
Okay, that is a great question because when I started painting, of course, I read all about everything and how you could get white, how you could save the whites and everything. But as you're going along and you become, your personality starts to become more obvious in your painting. There are going to be certain things that feel like you and certain things that do not feel like you, if that makes sense. So for me, when I tried the Frisket, and I know it's used widely, and I don't discourage the use of it, but for me, the Frisket left a very hard edge that was somehow distressing to me when I would remove it. It didn't look like it belonged. It was too blatant. It was too intense and too insistent. So I began to just try to paint around my shapes And once I learned that it wasn't important to be perfect, that I could just indicate or imply something. You can see on this one that the little fence, the little implication of a fence at the right side of this little white house. You can see how irregular that is. You know, there would have been a point in my life when if I had seen that, I would have tried to replicate that exactly. But I use repetition, but then it's very important if you're going to use repetition that you use variation with that as well. So you can see that each one is a little different, and they're very irregular. And that is an example there of when I don't use I don't seek perfection. There is a saying that's so wonderful that I have kept it with me always. Perfection is the enemy of great art. The less perfect you allow yourself to be, the more perfect your work will become.
Thank you. Switching over to black, a few people are asking how you make the very fine black lines. Barbara asked, what kind of brush do you use, or is it a pen? And Marcia is wondering if you use black on your palette, or is the palette knife what you use for the fine lines?
Yes.
Will you touch on that a little bit?
I will. It's a combination of things. Now, if you look at the fine lines that are in the two forward organic forms that have the strokes of red, you can see the lines that are almost, they're light. Those were scraped in with the point of my palette knife. But again, I've got repetition going there, and so I also had to have variety. So I had to then vary those lines by coming in with some black strokes, and those were used, those are put in with, it's either called a liner brush or a rigger brush. You'll see it represented both ways, and I have a small one and then one that's a little bigger for larger paintings, and then I used that rigger brush then to put these brush strokes in. And I think that's why if these textures and these elements are interesting in this painting to you, if you watch that video, that YouTube video, it's also on my website, you will see, and I hold up the palette knife when I get ready to use it, but I don't use a pen in anything, and all of this calligraphy is what I call it, that I use throughout the painting. You'll see it in the background trees, around the edges, all the varied strokes. You'll see it in the detail work that's on the front of the house to imply that possibly the front of that house is maybe some shingles or some siding. You'll see the calligraphy work all through, and I always take my paintings from white to black. And so the black calligraphy that you see along the road and in the windows and the foreground shapes, that's all done with a very black mix of paint. And I describe the different blacks that I mix, which are really quite simple. I have a Prussian blue base. If I want a warm black, I will add burnt sienna to it, or alizarin crimson, or both. And if I want a cool black, then I will simply add some sap green to it and maybe a teeny bit of burnt sienna. But those are simple to make and ever so much more attractive than any kind of tube black I think that you could use.
Okay, thank you. A few people have asked if we could go back to show some previous slides, and I'm not going to do that right now just because I want to keep going with the photo references and Joyce's art. And so I just want to remind everyone that we are recording this, and it'll be up on YouTube later today. So if you are wanting to look at the previous slides, just wait for the recording, and then you can pause it and look at them as you want. But we've gotten quite a few questions. I think another one just came in. I'm trying to read them as I'm talking. But I just want to make sure we get through everything. So I will throw this back to you, Joyce.
All right, thank you. Okay, now this is one of my favorite paintings, and this was, of course, we were right there on that road, and I took it through the car window. and quickly made some notes about it, and did my sketches later on that evening about it. But what drew me to this scene was, okay, there's a perfect opportunity to lead the eye right back into that wonderful distance. So I made note of that, how I love the distance that was implied here in this scene. But I knew that the painting would be about this old farmhouse. And once again, kind of like the laundry, I love a front porch. It just says hominess. It looks a little small in this photo, so I'm going to have to use my skills as a designer to make what I want to say a little more obvious. And that one lone pine tree that's behind that house, that was going to be an important element in my finished painting. So I did just what I said a moment ago. I kept the farmhouse, but can you see how I exaggerated it? I made it larger, and I kept that old piney tree, and I used that to add contrast. So because if you can put high contrast behind something that is very light, it's going to be a lot more prominent. So it was using that black and that contrast behind that white, crispy farmhouse just intensified the look of that. And by making it larger, then it became a very dominant shape in that composition. And the telephone poles were important to me in this painting because I saw it as a way to get back to the other thing that attracted me, which was that distance. So you can see how those little those telephones go into the distance and leave you there for a while to be able to explore that area. And I love the sun, so I have never painted a gray day. I love sunny days. If they are gray, I'll turn them into a sunny day. And I was able to imply this by just using nice gray from the leftover paint in my palette. I mixed the gray, and then I could splash those shadows across the front of the house. And you can see how those black windows immediately pull the eye right there to that shape. And then so that I don't have all green and all grays, I've added some floral color there. I think there were some peonies on one of the bushes, so I made note of that. And then I used that element, but I used it in a way that would contribute to the house, which is what it was going to be about. This is this was in Mendocino, California, and once it was a gray day, so you don't see one shadow there. And when you have a flat gray day like that, you won't have any shadows, but it's not important because you're an artist. You can paint those shadows in. You can turn that into any kind of day that you want it to be. But I love the geometry of the architecture in this scene. And I'm attracted to a fence, and it had plenty of fences to use, and I liked the organic shapes that were behind it. So I would use those elements. There's not a lot that I would leave out. I think I left out that little tiny shake shingle middle structure. It really didn't contribute, and in fact I thought it distracted a little bit from the design of these geometric shapes, so I did leave that out. But you'll see then when we go to the next how I arranged that. So there it is. I've pretty much used everything. You can see the white houses, the white architecture. You can see the fence, but I added movement to the fence line to make it more interesting. And I thought since it was sort of a colorless gray day, how about if I add a little red? And I had these buildings, and so I just decided, well, I would add some red to one of them. Not to take away from the main big shape of this white architecture, but when I introduced that red, then it was up to me then to let the eye see that color in other places in the painting. And so you can see how I've repeated that. That's called repetition again, but it's varied. So I have the large red shape, I have the mid-sized red shape, and I have a very small red shape. And then that red color is also repeated up into those roof lines with some burnt sienna, which it doesn't show really well with the And then all the organic shapes, just like I wanted, I love those. And so I just changed them around a little bit. And it's important that you create a great negative space. What you leave out is important as what you leave in. And Sarah, will you flip back to that original, the photo?
Oh, sorry, I went the wrong way. Hold on.
The other way?
Yeah, just a second.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What is the name of this one?
This one is called Mendocino Moment. Now you look at the negative space of the sky. That is very dominant, and that's not what I wanted to be dominant. So it was up to me to decrease that dominance because I want those architectural forms to be the dominant shapes in my painting. And you can see that it's not an interesting leftover space. So I had to cut that shape down, and then I had to increase the size of the organic forms that were behind it in order to get a more interesting negative space left over in that sky. And you'll see that now when you go back to the painting.
Yes. Much more interesting.
Yes, it's just a more interesting negative space. And you can see that there are hints of color up in those trees. That was a permanent rose that I just dropped into those shapes while they were still very wet so that they would bleed and blend nicely. And then it was up to me then. If I use it there, I have to repeat it. So I brought it down to the foreground of the painting, and I dropped it into this foreground color as well so that you can then travel around the painting and find a repeat of that color, permanent rose, all the way around the painting. And then I turned it into Sunny Day by just implying all of those shadows. This is the photo of the painting that is on the front of my new book, Painting Beautiful Watercolor Landscapes. It's called, we were in Cambria, California, I believe, and we ate at a little restaurant, and then we found a little brochure about a fruit farm. It's called Lynn's Fruit Farm out Santa Rosa Creek Road, and we decided to drive out there that day. And so this was us coming around the curve of that, and it had all of the elements that I loved. It had the farmhouse, it had the road, it had the vineyards in the back, and there's even a little house that sits back there on the hillside, tiny, so there's some nice distance there. But look how all those greens, this is why you can't paint from a photo. They're all very flat. The value will be misleading, too dark where you don't want it to be too dark. So that's why you learn about all of that so that you can use the magic of those principles of value and to create the illusion of depth. So you'll see I kept the vineyards, I kept the forward organic shapes, I kept the road, and I kept the little farmhouses, but I just rearranged them. And that whole vineyard was not in that original painting, but it doesn't matter. It was the idea of the vineyards that I was interested in. So I took those vineyards and that idea, and I used them to create a design and turn the little farmhouse roof red, because red is the complement of green, and it would be the focal point. It's going to be where the eye goes back first by way of that road. And purple for a road, you might not think to do that, but you want to be expressive with color. And so when you're putting all of these beautiful yellow and golds down, use a complement for that. And that's how that road ended up being a mauve color. And the sky, when you're thinking about doing a sky, you first say, is it about the sky or is it about the little farmhouse? Well, if it's about the little farmhouse, you don't want to make the sky too dominant and too intriguing, or that's going to be confusing to the viewer. It's like, what is this painting about, the sky or the farmhouse? So the sky is there, but it's very subtle, and it looks like it's far back because I kept the values light. And those are the kind of, you start making your decisions not based on things and how they really are, but you base your artistic decision on relationships. What is this value in relationship to the ones that surround it? And what where in the landscape do these elements reside? Are they close? Are they far? They would be warm. They would be cool. All of this is based on you know, things that are warm are going to, close are going to be warmer. Things that are far are going to be cooler. And you gain that knowledge through studying.
Real quick, Annette is asking, were those black spots on the foliage splattered?
Those are, no, I used to splatter a lot when I first started, but I don't do it too much anymore. You've got to be careful when you splatter because it has to be like anything else. It has to be random. You have to have your dominant area splatter, your subordinate area splatter, and it has to then contribute to what it is you want to say. If you get a lot of splatter going on off to the left and you want your eye to be over to the right, well then you can see how that would mess you up. So I don't really use splattering much anymore. Sometimes when I do my florals, I will do that. But these black strokes that you see are all made from a tiny rigger brush with black paint. And you can see some of the brush strokes that are around, let's say the top foliage shape on the right, they're done with a lighter color paint. Well, why? Because they're further back. So they can't be as prominent or as dark as the ones that are in the front. And those little black strokes, if you watch and you look, they're going to be like little stepping stones through this painting. If you start in the lower right corner with the black streaks and you follow along the base, you'll see they go right across that middle passage right over to the little house, which is where I want them to take you. Every stroke is purposeful. There's nothing random or thoughtless about any stroke. Every stroke will serve a purpose, and so when you put one down, you need to know how it's going to affect the outcome of your painting.
I want to ask this other question we just got to because I think it ties in nicely to what you're talking about. Jasmine asks, although you paint from a reference, do you plan exactly how it's going to be from start to finish, or does it just develop as you go along?
Okay, so I never paint from a photo. The only time that photo is out is to jog my memory and to use the shapes from it that I want to use. And so I have a process that I go through that I outline in the book and also on my DVDs. And I end up with, once I subtract the shapes that I need and delete the ones that I don't need, I put those into a sketch, a little small 4x6 sketch. It could even be smaller. And I do a value sketch. And it is from that value sketch that I then produce a color study. And my color studies are never larger than 9x12. And so the value sketch is going to be my guide for how dark or how light I want to mix my paint. And then the color study is so that I have worked out the colors and the temperatures of warm and cool. So from that color study, I will often tack it up at the top of my easel, and I will place my little value sketch down lower, and I will have these two references then that I can paint my large painting from, but never from a photo. It will lead you down the wrong path every time. And I strongly recommend, I would never ever begin a painting that I wanted to be of a larger format without having done all of that preparatory work, first with the inspiration, then with the value study, then with the color study, and then when I get ready to lay paint to large pieces of paper, I have confidence. I am in touch with my subject, and I have worked out all of the problems, and that's why my paintings often look as if they were so easy to do and that they have almost painted themselves. Well, that's because, I did a lot of preparatory work so that they would have that look.
Okay. Let's move on to the next one here. Oh, I like this.
Oh, I love this one. This one was, while we were on our travels, I read a little ad, a classified ad in a travel magazine, and it said, would you like to work at a lighthouse? and we were going down. We were a nomadic lifestyle for about 5 years in a motorhome right after we retired, and so I was in the front seat with my husband. We were driving down the road in this big 40-foot motorhome, and I said, "Oh gosh, look at this! Would you like to go work at a lighthouse?" And he said, "Sure. Where is it?" Well, it was on Highway 1, Point Arena, California, and we called, and they said, "Yeah, sure, come on." And what we did was we acted as docents. We would take people up to the top and give the history of the lighthouse, and I worked in the museum, and we were able to go up, and we got paid they gave us a spot for our RV, and we only had to work 15 hours a week, so we had all of that extra time to go up and down the Mendocino coast. And this was a little farm that I passed so many times as we would go up and down the coast there. And what I loved about it is I just thought, my gosh, what would it feel like to be able to wake up to that view every morning? And I was just taken with the family that must live there and what it would be like to live out your days in such a setting. And so finally we did stop, and we parked right there, and I took photos. And when I got out of the car, I realized that those bushes in the front were blackberries. Well, that just added to the story, because not only did they have a view to die for, they had blackberries too. So the painting became Pacific View and blackberries too. And you can see what fine architectural elements there are there. And you can see how the telephone poles just lead the viewer right back to the sea. And I used red to attract the eye and just give the painting a little more interest. And again, you can see the sky is very subtle and subdued, because it's about this farmhouse that has this wonderful view to look out upon every morning and every day.
I love that one. Looks like a great place to live for a while.
And this is showing again, because it's the same photo, and I put this in so that you could see there are different ways that you can address the same scene. And the first one that I showed, the first slide of this same photo, same scene, was the second painting of this scene. And but the traction was all the same: the geometric shapes, the distance, the country road that led you into it, and you can see my first. You can see the first painting that resulted from the same photo. And this time, instead of a gray barn and a white front building, I used a white barn and a red front building. But basically, it's all the same. And again, back to the question about the frisket, none of the white spaces that you see, I don't use gouache paint to get white. You can see how my little fence is very free and rough and imprecise because I didn't use frisket. But you have to have planning, and that's why you do the planning that I was talking about. I knew that when I got to that point, I needed to be ready to have the time to paint around those shapes. Because, you know, watercolor is not the easiest medium to conquer. You can't conquer it. But you do have to understand its characteristics enough to be able to nudge it into the directions that you want it to go. And you have to plan ahead so that if the minute it hits the paper, the brush stroke applies the paint to the paper, it is going to begin drying. And it's during that drying phase when we're trying to add paint that the accidents happen and things happen. You get blooms, you get dullness, you lose your transparency. That all happens during that drying phase, so you have to learn what you can do, how heavy your paint needs to be, how thin it needs to be, how thick it needs to be based on what stage of drying that passage is in. And that just comes from doing it and practicing and practicing. This was in Pennsylvania, and it had everything that I liked. It had the path or the ruts of the road. It had the field. It had the soft organic shapes. It had the distance. It had the farm scene. I just loved this scene. The only thing I was disappointed with was that the farmer had mowed the field. He'd harvested whatever it was that was growing there. So just like I said about the sun, no problem. If there's no sun, you just paint it in. So that was really not a problem. I could just add that back because that was, to me, that was going to be a very important textural element and directional element that would lead my eye back to those farm structures that are in the background. And so I just put them back in. And then I use what I know about warm colors in the front, cool colors in the back. These are all things that I teach in my workshops. I teach it in the book. That's why I was so excited to be able to write this book, because it gave me a chance to share what is right there for us to learn. And it really is magic when you learn how to use these elements, and you can take a flat sheet of white paper and put your knowledge onto that paper and have it almost look as if you could walk into the scene. And that's the power of perspective and the power of warm and cool colors, of line, all of that texture. You learn all of that, and then you gain power in how to represent these things that you want to represent.
Okay, I want to interrupt really quick because I just realized we're getting close to the top of the hour, and in case some people have to leave us, we have quite a few more slides to go through, but I'm going to go ahead and skip to the last one because I really want to tell people about your book really quick. And then we can take some more questions, and we can go through the remainder of these slides if you're able to stay and do a little bit of overtime with us, Joyce. How does that sound?
Oh, I would love to, yes.
Okay.
I'm talking about the thing I love most, so it won't be hard for me to stay over.
Okay, great. Well, for those of you who have to leave us at the top of the hour, I just want to thank everyone for joining us and let you know that we have a coupon code, which is Hicks10, and that will give you 10% off Joyce's book, Painting Beautiful Watercolor Landscapes. And I have a copy of her book right here in front of me, and let me tell you, it is really pretty. I could look at this all day. Your work is just absolutely gorgeous.
Thank
you. Some of the things in this book that Joyce includes is how to get started, finding your inspiration, and then saying it with color, rediscovering your idea, and using the elements and principles of design. And finally, she has some step-by-step demonstrations for you. So it kind of covers a little bit of everything from start to finish on watercolor landscapes. And like I said, it's just absolutely beautiful to look through, and you give a lot of great detail and some great demos in this book. So if you guys enjoy her artwork and you want some more great tips for her, I definitely encourage you to get a copy of this book at Northlight Shop. And let me show you real quick, if I can take you to Northlight Shop, I'll show you where you can get that. If my computer goes fast, if not, we'll just let you guys find it yourself. But if you just type Joyce's name into the search, her book will come up right here, Painting Beautiful Watercolor Landscapes. And I believe, oh yes, you have a Google preview, so you guys can take a look in here. There's that piece she was just talking about where she added some of the vineyard and gave you great information on that one. But definitely go to Northlight Shop, take a look at this peek inside, and you'll kind of see she includes the materials. Everything you need is in this book. So look at this. This is just great. Beautiful. Okay, well, I could look at this all day, but I just wanted to make sure I shared this really quick for people who have to jump out. I'm sorry you have to leave us if you have to leave at 2 o'clock, but we are recording this, and it will be up on YouTube later today. And like I said, you'll get an email in the next few days with the coupon code and a link to the recording. And I'm not sure that the coupon code will work today, but it should be working by Thursday when you get the follow-up email for sure. But you can try it now and go ahead and pick up your copy of Joyce's book. All right, let me get back to the PowerPoint here. And I believe we were on slide 20-something. Oh, well, we haven't talked about this one yet. So if you want, you can go ahead and talk about a few more of these, and then we'll get to some more questions.
Okay, that sounds great. This was in Pennsylvania, and it's an excellent example, I feel, of how you don't have to have this grand and fancy scene to end up with a compelling piece of art. What drew me to this scene was the contrast between the old, the neglected, the forgotten look of these old houses that are behind there. And then in the foreground, you have these brand new, fresh peonies. I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful contrast between those two things. And I love architectural shapes. And look how that element of repetition is used up in the chimneys. And so I knew that I could use those shapes to take the eye right back into the painting. And it had the remnants of some kind of a road, so I knew I could change that to be a path or a road or anything else to get the eye on back into my scene. And I love red, and there I have it. I have this dominant red shape that would become the focal point, and then I have a subordinate red shape that I can use. And I changed, again, I made a more interesting negative space left over from the sky because it was just kind of a nondescript, a boring space up here in the sky. So you can see how I just captured those things that I defined before I even started. What is important to me? What did I want to accomplish? What did I want to say? I made note of all of that. And then I used my knowledge of the principles of design and the elements of design then to translate that and hopefully so that you could be able to see what I saw. And so you can see how the road did exactly as it was intended. It takes the eye. I changed it into a little winding path, takes the eye right back. And you can see how I've also punctuated that little pathway back with the green shapes, so that the eye can hop from each of those green shapes. And you can see the chimney pattern that I talked about earlier. The first chimney, and then I left the chimneys white as they go back because they were a little more contrast, and they also became little stepping stones to move the eye back. But you don't want the eye to get to the background and then get stuck back there. So you have to be sure that you make your dominant element compelling enough that the eye wants to come back up front. And then the peonies, it was more about the big red house, and the peonies then just kind of lend that air of softness and hominess and a place that we'd all like to be. And of course then I represented the sun by laying in those great shadows. Shadows are great unifiers. You want to use them anytime you can. Not necessarily as they may really be, because they may be off pointing in the wrong direction, but use those shadows then to intensify and to complement what the painting is about. So this was on our way back to the lighthouse. We had our time off, and we'd been traveling up the highway there, and we were on our way back to Point Arena. And when we came around this curve, I saw the red wildflowers along the edge of the road, and I could not believe my eyes. I had never seen wildflowers that color, that bright, that intense, just growing. I mean, I don't know who would have planted them out there. And so that just really caught my eye. And then you can't see it in this photo, but far to the right, at the back at the horizon, you'll see a glimmer of the sea. So the sea was back there. So this was what my painting was going to be about, this peaceful country road that had these glorious red wildflowers growing, and all led straight back to the sea. So it's important that you define what it is you're trying to say and what you want to say. And for me, it's always about how does the place make me feel, because that's what I want to share with others, how these places, the joy that I felt in the landscape. I want to try to share that. It's not so much that I wanted to share a road or the sea or the fence post or a telephone. I want to share the feeling of the place. And so that's what I attempted to do here. And I painted this early on, and I've always wanted to paint this scene again. And it's been on my mind a lot lately, and so you may see this revisited someday in the near future. My workshops keep me really busy now. I travel all over the United States, and it has become the emphasis of my work. It's what I really find most joy in. It's really not the painting, but being able to go around and share with people what I've been able to learn, because everybody is on the same path. They're wanting to be able to paint these scenes that we can feel good about and relate to. And so that's the workshops have really been a blessing for me. This was in Florida. Looks pretty dreary. All of my scenes are pretty ordinary. Nothing, no fancy houses or anything. But here again, there's that laundry grabs me every time. And I love the old white houses, and so it had that. I wanted to use the house. I wanted to use the laundry. And there's some little buildings on the far right. It may only just be a little roof line there, but I knew I would probably want to use that shape to somehow balance. But I knew I wouldn't care to use the playground equipment, nor would I probably need that house in the back. But I would use the sunshine. It was really a great bright day. A great bright day. So I simplify. What you want to do is just simplify, 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 because the simpler you can make your shapes and the fewer shapes you can have, the more powerful and compelling your composition would be. When we get too much information in, it becomes information overload, and the viewer really doesn't know where to look or where to start. So you want to keep everything simple. And even though it was the laundry that drew me, I had to subdue that. It was right in the middle of the photo, and I knew that would not be a good place to start. And so I wanted it in for the hominess it would imply, but you can see how subdued it is in relationship to the big white house, which became. And then that upper story window has more contrast than any of the other windows and any of the shapes, because that's where I wanted the eye to come first. And then I used elements of texture and contrast and value to move the eye then around the painting. And there you see my little black calligraphy strokes again, and they go right on around the painting, just like little stepping stones. It's the power you have as an artist to take the viewer on a visual journey. This was really kind of the way my career started. This was in Virginia, and we were out again trying to find country roads to photograph, and we were on our way back to where an RV resort where we had parked our big old motorhome, and we pulled a car, so we were out finding it. So just as we were coming back, there was a sign there on the roadway, and it pointed up a dirt road, not a dirt road, but an asphalt road like that, and it said, "This way to Greenwood." So I said again, let's just go down this road and see what it was. And so we headed down the road, and I did take this picture, and you can see it curves on around, and as we got down that curve, there was a vineyard back there. And so this was the first painting that I entered into the American Watercolor Society competition, and lucky for me that one of the editors at Northlight saw that painting, and that resulted in a wonderful invitation to do a magazine article about me and my work, and everything just kind of took off after that, and I have been forever appreciative of that opportunity. But you can see I used the same elements. I used the road. I used the fence line. I didn't see the vineyard, but I knew it was back there, so why not just bring the vineyard up front so that you guys can see it too? And that's what I did. I want you to see what I saw, and if I have to move things around in order for you to see that whole experience, then I will do that, and that's what you give yourself permission to do. Paint it how you want it to be, not how it actually is. This was up when we were going out Santa Rosa Creek Road, that first little painting that you saw, the painting that's on the cover of the book. This was on our way to Lynn's Fruit Farm, and here we came up on this wonderful little white farmhouse. Again, you can see the implication of the vineyard over there on the left. It's got some great telephone poles, these white architectural shapes, and a road to lead you in. And just, you know, I'm just thinking, wow, would this ever be a great place to live? I want to paint something where I want to go live. And so that became what I was going to paint about, a place that I would love to go live. And I just was going to move everything around the way I wanted it. And so you'll see that in the next painting. There's that vineyard again. It's just design. Those are just paint strokes up there. They don't have to be where it actually was in the photo. That's why I don't paint from photos. I just want to get the idea from the photo, the essence of the place and how I felt that day, and then I'm going to move everything around. But you can see I use the idea of the vineyard. I use the idea of the distant hills. I use the idea of both of those architectural shapes, the farmhouse and the shed. I use the road, and I use the fence. And this is another good example of how, if you don't use Frisket, you can have a very, the way this fence looks fits with the way the rest of my painting looks. And if I had used Frisket to put that, you know, block that all out, and then I take it off, it's going to be very harsh, and I'm going to have to spend time trying to soften the edges and do a lot of work to it to make it fit with the look of my work. Now this is the same road, the same scene that you saw early on of the coastal cottages, and this is just another viewpoint. The other was a close-up view of those two cottages, but I loved this place. It was the feel of the place, and I thought, oh, what would it be like to live somewhere like that and wake up to that every morning in those humble little houses. I just loved them, and they're just kind of unkept, and but you can see the implication of some floral color here, and you can see the telephone poles. There's a little sign there, an arrow that points you around the curve, and so I'm thinking, but the thing I didn't like on this scene is I didn't like the way that the view was obstructed with that organic form. So I may or may not have used that, but if I did use that in this next painting, then I wanted to make sure that it was not distracting at all. But I used the fence, and see the little birdhouse? It's right in front of that first white house. I like that little birdhouse because it's kind of like the clothesline. It gave it implied life going on there, and I loved it. So I was for sure going to use that. So there's the little birdhouse, and I gave it a red roof because it's a great complement to those greens, and I did leave that last structure there. And the reason that organic form at the very end of the lane, which I thought might be a problem in the beginning, as I started doing my value sketch and laying out my design, I realized that it really was a great thing, because if I didn't make it so black like it was in the photo, that's why you can't use the photos, then it would give me a more interesting negative shape, leftover shape. You can see now that the sky is broken up, and it has a mid-size on the left area, a little larger area on the right, and it broke up the sea so that I could let it peek out from behind that. So those are the kind of questions you ask yourself. How is it going to help, or how will this shape hinder, and will it contribute to what it is you're wanting to do? And pretty much left them the same. I did change the color of that front roof line. I used the idea of the floral and added it throughout the painting, and the little sign with the arrow there at the end of the road takes the viewer then on back, and it adds a little mystery of, well, wonder what's around that corner. This was another painting that got me on my way to earning signature membership in the American Watercolor Society. And I think the reason this painting was chosen is because it was a great design, a composition that had been so simplified. And that's really what you want. You're not about painting things. If you want to paint things, you might as well just use a camera and you can record those things. We don't want to be human cameras trying to record everything that we see, but you want to paint the character of a place, the essence of a place. And I think I had simplified this to the point that it did become a very compelling design. But what drew me, one, I didn't appreciate the fact that there was no sun, but I knew I had the power to change that. But it was those green roofs. I thought, look how faded they are, and look how long. They've probably not seen a coat of paint for years, or if the shingles were built-in green, they have long since been sun-faded, and I thought, I can bring that back. I can bring that back, and then I can use white, and look at the rose. It leads you right back to the painting. That's why I love rose fields, that they are such nice, and they give rhythm to your work. And then there's your distance again. So that's going to make it look, this is going to give this a lot of depth by having that element of a distance back there. And you can see then on the next slide how I tried to accomplish all those things. So I've got the white, I call this White Barns in Virginia, and I think this was my third acceptance juried into the American Watercolor Society, and all three of my entries that earned me my signature membership then went on a year-long tour, and this, I believe, was the last one. And so I worked very hard for that, and I say for everyone who's beginning their journey, we're all on the same journey. We're just at different places on the path. There's no big, not like, I'm just a beginner, and it's just that we're in different places. So you keep along that path, and you set your goals, and that's what I did as an artist. In the beginning, I set goals for myself. I want to learn all about my pigments. I want to learn about how the ratio of the water versus the paint. I want to learn about design. I set these, and as I accomplished them, then I began to get better. And I said, well, now I would like to have some validation, and how can I get that? Well, maybe if I could enter some of these shows. I began small with membership shows, and then I got my confidence up, and I then entered the national and the international shows. And in order to get a signature membership, you have to have been accepted 3 times into the American Watercolor Society, and then you earn points for the awards. And I was blessed that all 3 of the paintings that I entered, they did all win awards, and they all went on the tour, and they did earn me that signature membership. And so I'm very, very proud of that. And it was obtained through hard work and study, because painting is more about the knowledge of how to create art than it is about just putting paint on paper. So you can see the rows, how I changed those. I created the design, and I got my depth, my rhythm, and I got my green rooftops.
Wow, thank you so much, Joyce. Your art, like I said, it's such an inspiration. It's just absolutely beautiful. I could look at them all day.
Thank you, Sarah.
We have so many great questions here. I want to get to a few of them that have kind of been asked a few times. And, we're getting such positive feedback, we're going to just have to do another webinar, part 2 or something.
I would love to do that. Let's do it.
A lot of people have commented on they really like your more free style, and Trevor is wondering if there are any exercises that you can do to paint more freely instead of trying to paint too much detail and too realistically.
Yes, absolutely. And I had to learn it too, because when I first painted a picket fence, every picket was 2 inches wide, 3 feet tall, and they had the same distance between them, and I mean, they were exact. And so we all start there because we're wired that way. Our brain wants to replicate, and so it's hard to get to that other place. But I have laid out some exercises in the books, and I teach it also in my workshops about how you can begin painting from your imagination. There are specific steps that I take you through to, and what this does is it starts to train, as long as you're trying to replicate something from a photo or a picture or whatever, if you're in your technical brain, you're trying to replicate what you're seeing. In order to get over to that creative space, you have to acquire enough knowledge about what it takes so that you can get to the creative space, because once you start painting, you don't want to be making those decisions. And so I have one particular exercise that I did a lot myself, and it was called Painting from Your Imagination. And I lay the steps to that out in my book and through my workshops. But it's very easy, and it just kind of trains you not to be looking at something, because as long as you're looking at something and trying to replicate it, it's going to slow you down and not allow you to be as creative. You can't get to that special place that's within all of us.
Okay. We have a couple questions about clouds and skies, but real quick I want to answer Marilyn's question. Marilyn asks, does Joyce cover how to put the sun into a painting in her book? And from looking at your book right here, I would say yes, there's a demonstration called Turn a Gray Day into a Sunny One. So it sounds like that's exactly what Marilyn is looking for. So I just wanted to let her know that that is included in your book. And I'm trying to flip to it right now, but oh yeah, here we go. It's talking about adding some sunny warmth and how you add warmth to the houses and painting the shadows, adding the shadows, and kind of, it looks like you talk about kind of seeing how to do that. So yes, Marilyn, that is covered in her book. Do you want to add any more to that, Joyce?
No, I think it's really, it is easy to turn a gray day into a sunny day, because there are just certain things that need to be present, and that's warmth. So you learn how to apply that warmth. And then shadows, the intensity of your shadows are going to be indicators for how intense the sun is. And you can get out all of your art magazines and your art books and start looking at artists who paint sunny paintings, like myself, and see how they have addressed the sun. And just remember, put that photo away and use what your knowledge about how to create the look of sunlight instead of trying to, take it from a photo, because it will lead you down the wrong path. Believe me, I've had to go through all of that. But you can paint sunshine so easily. There are just a few things that you need to know, and you've got to contrast that with coolness, so that the warmth is even more intense. So without the contrast of the cool, the warm is not going to look as warm, and that's just another little tidbit that you learn along the way.
Okay, so the skies and clouds questions come from a few people, Yvonne and Laura. Patricia and Yvonne. And Patricia asks, how do you make the clouds so realistic? And then Yvonne is asking, how do you paint your skies, the ones that include the movement of the clouds? So if you'll touch on clouds and skies a little bit for us.
Okay. Yes, and clouds, for some reason, they make us think that they're hard. And when I first started trying to replicate a cloud, and you can hear me say replicate, I was trying to be exact about it, and boy, they just look so hard and unnatural. And there's one section that I talk about, I think it's in the book, that where you use all of your brush. You don't just use the top point of it, but I do a lot of my cloud. You've got to have those interesting edges, and that's got to be repeated. And then you've got to have some crisp edges, which is repeated. So you have a variety of edges going, and there's a way to get that by softening with water and using the side of your brush to get that crisp edge, and then knowing that a sky, if it's not about the sky, needs to be subtle, and knowing that if the sky is far back in the landscape, then it has to be cool as compared to the things that are up front in the landscape. But the making of those skies is very, very simple. It's all just about the brush stroke and getting the crisp edge, the soft edge, and not to be too intense with that color. But again, you don't just do it immediately if you're just beginning to paint skies, and I did that I learned that like I've learned everything else, as I learned from the artists who had gone before me. I looked at their skies, and then I would try to figure out how did they imply what they were implying. And I just practiced, and it was a long while before I could make my skies look as if they belonged to the rest of my painting. You don't want two separate paintings, a sky painting and a the landscape painting. But don't be feeling rushed, to conquer all of these different symbols that you'll put into the landscape. It comes through practice, and for me, it's the journey. It's the fun of learning, the fun of acquiring the knowledge that it takes to do what I want to do, whether that's baking a pumpkin pie or painting a work of art. And so enjoy that journey. If there's something you want to learn to paint, learn from the other artists that have gone before you, and practice and practice. And then if you compare yourself and you critique yourself, just always be sure that you compare yourself with another person that is at the same place in their journey that you are. Because if you compare yourself with someone that's 5 miles down the road further than you are, instead of saying that to yourself, you will say, well, maybe they're more talented than I am, and that's why their skies are better. But it won't be about that. It will be because they're further along with their study. And so be fair to yourself and compare apples to apples, and then just keep doing it, and you get better as you do it.
I agree with that. It's great advice. And I think ultimately the best comparison is yourself. If you're getting better than you were yesterday, then hey, you're on the right track.
Yes, and I'll tell you what, determination and perseverance is far more important than any talent you might possess.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Well, I don't want to keep you much longer. Thank you so much for staying after with us. Real quick, a few people are asking if you teach any online workshops.
I don't have online workshops. I do have DVDs. They're available on my website, and I do teach my workshops. I love doing my workshops, and if you have a club, an organization, a society that would care to sponsor me, I will be there with bells on. I just need the invitation, and then we'll make arrangements. My calendar is full, and I'm looking into 2016, but there are still slots open here and there, and I would love to come to any city or any place to share what I've learned about watercolor. Okay,
well, I manage Artist Network University, so I might have to twist your arm and get you to come teach some online courses for us.
That would be great. I would love that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we're getting so much positive feedback here. So thank you guys so much for being here, and I'm glad everyone really enjoyed it. And thank you so much, Joyce, for giving us so much of your time and sharing your tips and talent with us. And like I said, we'll have to do another webinar in the future. And everyone, make sure you get Joyce's book, Painting Beautiful Watercolor Landscapes, at northlightshop.com. And as I mentioned at the beginning, feel free to share the YouTube recording with your friends on Facebook or wherever. And thanks again, everyone, for being here. And we'll go ahead and wrap this up. And
yes.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to hang on to these questions too. So maybe we can get some of these answered in a future webinar.
Sarah, I also want to thank you for being keeping track of everything for me, and doing such a great job as my host, and to thank everybody for joining me on this little webinar. It's what I love to do, and I am totally aware that if it were not for all of you that are out there tuning in today, I would not be doing what I'm doing today. So thank you so much. I appreciate it and feel truly blessed to have you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Peace.
Bye-bye.